another quote. This quote is from Amanda Fountain, and it's all in the words from 2008. I also chose to include this a quote from this article just because she really goes in depth on how the media is handling these crimes, and she is essentially calling them out for how they can fix these issues. So she says, when the victim was portrayed negatively, participants were more likely to assign blame to her and less likely to assign responsibility or control to the assailant. In her article, she focuses on, I just lost my train of thought. She focuses a lot on how the media handles these cases, whether it's negatively or positively, and she compares them. It's more of like I'm going to say like a data or like a study, just comparing, contrasting, and then she has all that data. So like I've mentioned before, there's a bias there, and whether it's positive or negative, it's going to influence the way that the case is looked at, the way that the victim is looked at, the offender, and also the case itself. Next, we're talking about the need for factual reporting. Accurate, fast-paced reporting is the foundation of ethical journalism, especially when covering sensitive topics like sex crimes. When the media speculates, distorts facts, or uses emotionally charged language, it doesn't just affect the story, it affects real life. Factual evidence ensures that the public isn't misled, that victims are treated with respect, and that accused individuals are not tried by the media before the courts. It also plays a major role in reshaping how society views these crimes, helping move away from stigma and toward understanding justice. So the need for factual reporting, media should report only verified evidence-based information. Don't zhuzh it up. Like I said, we need to focus on what is there, what we have, and report on that. Avoid speculation, stereotypes, or emotional manipulation. Factual reporting builds public trust and supports legal processes. Biased or misleading stories harm both victims and the due process. And ethical journalism helps shift cultural perceptions about sex crimes. So what I mean in the second to last point, biased or misleading stories harm both victims and due process. When we see the public is shifted in this way, we're kind of in between. It can affect the way that the due process is served because the jury might not see the case as it should be. They might not see it clearly. They're influenced by what the media is reporting and not what is being presented in court. Next, who are the victims? Victims of sex crimes can come from all walks of life. There is no single profile. One damaging myth perpetuated by some media coverage is that only certain can be the victims. In reality, men, women, children, LGBTQ members are also affected. So victimhood is not defined by appearance, behavior, or lifestyle. We're just living, and sadly, people target us. Stereotyping victims can make it harder for some to seek help, as we talked about earlier, and understanding that diversity helps create inclusive support systems. There are a lot of counseling services, therapy services, but at the same time, if somebody feels like there's a bias against them, or that they are being discriminated against, they're more likely not to get help. And so by opening it up to diversity, you can help create inclusive support systems. Who are the offenders? Again, there's not just one form of life for offenders. So there's not a certain type of offender either. Perpetrators, of sexual violence can be anyone. Friends, family members, coworkers, or people in positions of authority. Unfortunately, the media tends to focus on high-profile, extreme cases, which causes an illusion that most offenders are obviously dangerous or deviant. Yet many use manipulation and trust and avoid violence to exploit their victims. So when we stereotype offenders, we miss the warning signs and contribute it to an environment where abuse can continue to go unnoticed. So, like I said, anyone can be an offender. Offenders can be strangers, acquaintances, or trusted individuals. Media often focuses on extreme, sensationalized cases. Framing offenders as monsters can make it harder to recognize real-world threats. We're always on the lookout for the creepy guy, but it could be your best friend. You never know. Overgeneralizing creates false security and overlooks systemic issues. Media framing and judgment. How a story is told changes how it's understood. Media outlets may refer to an accused offender as a rising star or pillar of the community, while simultaneously implying that the victim made poor choices, calling them out for their occupation, their relationship history, different things like that. This contrast subtly shifts blame and can create bias before the facts are fully known. Framing can influence not only the public, but also jurors, lawyers, and judges, like I discussed earlier. That's why media outlets must choose their words carefully. And Amanda Fountain also discusses this in her article. Excuse me. She says, if a story leans forward sympathy for, I'm going to restart that. If a story leans forward towards sympathy for the accused or judgment towards the victim, it sends a powerful message, even if it's unintentional. Okay, next is bias against the accused. Media often assumes guilt before trial. Like I discussed in the Menendez brothers case, although they were eventually found guilty, a lot of people already assume that they were guilty. On the other hand, some assume that they were innocent. However, that just goes to show how shifted and how swayed the public can be to form an opinion. The trial by media can impact legal fairness and public opinion. That also goes into that case. Public scrutiny may affect the accused's reputation even if they are innocent. Negative media coverage can lead to prejudicial outcomes in court, and ethical reporting should respect the presumption of innocence. In America, you're innocent until proven guilty. However, a lot of the time that isn't necessarily committed to and followed, especially from the media. They just assume that everybody's guilty, or in some cases, they assume that some people are innocent. However, I feel like a lot of the time you see the pressure from the media to say, oh, this person is guilty for this crime. So the media's eagerness to discuss every detail of the case, especially when it's sensational, can create public bias. A person's reputation may be tarnished regardless of the outcome. Ethical journalism means respecting the fairness of the trial and avoiding premature conclusions that might influence the court or public opinion. Moving onward, changing the narrative. Media has the power to raise awareness, not just report events. Focus should shift from blame to speculate to truth and education. Ethical journalism can promote victim support and systemic change. Audiences are demanding more responsible coverage, and social media and activism are driving a new standard of accountability. The last point is especially more prominent nowadays. So the media can do more than just report. It can educate, advocate, and support real change. While historically coverage of sex crimes has been harmful or sensationalized, we're beginning to see a shift. More journalists are providing accurate, sensitive reporting, and the public is starting to call out victim blaming and bias, something that I feel like is a very positive thing. This change is driven not just by professional ethics, but also by audience expectations. With the rise of social media movements like the #MeToo movement, survivors have a louder voice and are influencing how their stories are told. The press has a responsibility to reflect this evolving standard and help move the conversation forward. So rather than scrutinizing against these crimes and saying hush hush about it, we need to be more open and providing help to these individuals. Okay, last one. So for my conclusion, I just decided to wrap things up. I say, in conclusion, the way the media reports on sex crimes has lasting impacts, not just on individual cases, but on culture as a whole. Journalists and media outlets have a responsibility to report ethically, avoid harmful tropes, and respect both victims and the accused. We as media consumers have a role to play as well. By questioning what we read, supporting responsible outlets, and calling out bias, we can help create pressure for change. It's not just about better headlines, it's about actually serving justice and supporting these victims. So the press has enormous influence on public understanding of sex crimes. Point 2 is that coverage must be truthful, respectful, and free of bias. Moving on, it's victims deserve dignity and not judgment. Accused individuals deserve fair treatment, not premature guilt, and we must hold the media accountable for the narratives that they create. And there's my works cited. I really appreciate you listening to this video. Like I said, if there's any issues with the audio or seeing the video itself, please reach out to me, as I was having some difficulties and issues with this. So yeah, thank you for watching.